So you're a talking Pikachu with no memories who's addicted to caffeine.
I could stop whenever I want. These are just choices. Another round, extra shot, black as night.
The film follows Tim Goodman, a young man who's kind of a little bit unsure as what to do next in his life, who finds out that his dad died suddenly. He travels to Rhyme City, this amazing place where Pokemon and humans live alongside each other, where his dad worked as a policeman, and through investigating his dad's death, comes across this Pikachu with a detective hat on, Detective Pikachu. The rest of the plot of the film is your standard family generic conspiracy stuff, and it has a couple of villains who are absolutely not surprising in any way whatsoever. I don't even know if I can really spoil it, and most of you have probably seen it already, but let's not talk about the plot because it's probably one of the least interesting things about the film. Surprising is probably the main adjective I would apply to Detective Pikachu. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the film. I was surprised by how much thought went into it, and I was surprised by how clever it was in how it told its story. Although I will stop there and say there's nothing particularly clever about the story itself. It's a simple film, and one of the things that I really liked about it was that it's firmly aimed at a family audience. There's not a lot of stuff for family audiences now. You've basically got the Disney films, well, I mean, not, the entirety of the Disney films because they own almost everything now, but the kind of Disney princess movies, and you've also got Pixar. But otherwise, a lot of movies that go on general release are kind of grim in their tone or are full of edgy humour and occasionally kind of violent or scary stuff. So a movie like Detective Pikachu is actually really well positioned because it has a clever, funny lead who the parents can laugh with, Detective Pikachu, and it also has a heartfelt story in the middle of it that's simple enough for kids to understand and play along with. Detective Pikachu has a couple of strong emotional beats in its story that are surprisingly well told. Tim finding out that his dad has died is heartbreaking and really well portrayed by the director and by the actors, including Justice Smith, who's a promising young lead in this film. A couple of scenes later, Tim is going around his dad's apartment in Rhyme City and finds that he had kitted out a bedroom, basically like a kid's bedroom, for him to move into and had never changed it, even in all those years that had passed in their distant relationship. He sits down on the bed and has a series of flashbacks that really economically tell you the story of the dad and the son reacting to his mum's death. Like a lot of things in the film, there's nothing particularly revolutionary about that emotional story. A young man finds out he's an orphan and then he goes on a quest to avenge his father. Thanks, Joseph Campbell, for everything you've done for screenwriting. But despite that simplicity, or maybe because of it, the film is told in a really clean, careful, and clever way. The actual exposition of that story is really well done, and that really elevates it beyond a relatively simplistic setting. And speaking of settings, I actually love Rhyme City. I think it's an amazing setting for a film, and it's one that will really spark the imagination of children who see the movie, which is one of my big criteria for a family blockbuster, that it ought to be something that children could think about imaginatively, that they can incorporate into their play. Rhyme City is this kind of syncretic geographic location. The trains are Japanese, the accents on the street are almost all American, the signage is very Asian in its influence, it looks almost like Hong Kong at times, and yet the city itself is very clearly London. A lot of the film seems to take place in and around Liverpool Street Station. There's quite a recognisable bit of bank/Barbican that's visible on screen for a while during the climax of the film, and the Gherkin, which is a really iconic London landmark, is prominently seen in the skyline a number of times. But it's not annoying like the bad geography in a film like Tom Cruise's The Mummy, that's clearly set in London and yet seems to follow its own rules, ditto for The Dark World. Instead, it feels like part of the fun and play of the film, and that's something that's also true of the broad film noir tone that's kind of played on throughout the movie. I'm almost done talking about this movie because there's not much else to say about it. I enjoyed it and I think it's something that families will enjoy, but it's not particularly deep and there's not much to analyse. Two things that I wanted to point out though. Firstly, the world building in the film is really good. My friend asked me afterwards, do I have to be invested in the storyline of Pokemon to get this movie? And the answer is no. I haven't played a Pokemon game since I was like probably 10 at the oldest, and yet for me the movie really flowed. Sure, I didn't recognise a lot of the Pokemon, but the way that they're built into the world and the way that they occupy these normal roles there is really well thought through, and that helps the film feel a lot more natural than a lot of video game adaptations. This isn't Super Mario Bros. Is what I'm saying, and it's almost certainly not Sonic. I think it's going to be terrible. I think that's pretty clear, right? I think we're all agreed on that. The overall effect is that it feels less like a video game movie with all that entails, and more like a film that takes really strong inspiration from video games and also the cartoons. And the other thing I wanted to say about this is that I really like the pacing in it, and one of the reasons why is because the film actually has set pieces. I talk about set pieces a lot and I realize that I never really define them. A set piece is kind of a section of a film that uses a choreographed set of events to tell part of the story in a concerted way. That's quite a broad definition, and it's because a set piece can be applied to a lot of different genres. You'll see set pieces in Indiana Jones, like running away from a boulder in a temple, and you'll also see set pieces in comedies, like having your chest waxed in The 40-Year-Old Virgin. I've been missing set pieces because they seem to be kind of out of fashion. For instance, Endgame features very little in the way of concrete set pieces. There aren't like clearly defined chases or action sequences, with maybe the exception of the end sequence of the film. But here there's a number of really well thought through choreographed sequences that work really well. When Tim goes to his dad's office, he breaks this vial of this weird drug that makes all of the Pokemon kind of aggravated and aggressive, and a number of Pokemon who are hanging out outside burst into the office and him and Pikachu have to run away from it, up the building and out the side down like a chute. That's a really fun set piece. It's well thought through, it's entertaining to watch, kind of funny. It sets up the threat of that drug, which is central to the story, and it also progresses them out of the apartment in a really practical but yet interesting way. The same can be said of the underground fighting arena sequence in the film, which occupies a really similar function within the movie. But it's also true that little bits of storytelling are basically done as set pieces. In particular, when they find this secret lab, there's like a hologram record of everything that's gone on in there. And having that portrayed as the characters walk around within it is a really nice, just simple way of telling that story, but also essentially adding a set piece into it, which mirrors something that happens right at the start of the film. Detective Pikachu then is a relatively traditional, simple family film that's nevertheless told in a clean, clever, efficient, and funny way. That's it from me. Have a good one. Bye for now.